A sudden 24-hour intensification as Elsa, now a Category 1 hurricane, has its sights set on the southeastern United States. The latest models plus some meteorologist Q&A starts now here on Tracking the Tropics. Hey there, folks. JB Buno here with you in your hurricane headquarters. A lot to get to on this edition of Tracking the Tropics as we keep a very close eye on Elsa there on the center of your screen. On the right side of your screen, NBC 23 Chief Meteorologist Isaac Williams joining us from South Texas to help us monitor Elsa as Elsa makes its way a little bit closer towards the United States. Great to have Isaac back on the program. We'll be hearing from him momentarily, but we want to hear from you in the Facebook Live comment section using the hashtags that we have here on your screen. We're minutes away from a meteorologist Q&A where we'll be taking your questions out of the Facebook Live comment section, but only if they have the hashtags you see on your screen, hashtag Hey Isaac, hashtag Hey JB, or hashtag Hey Amanda for Tracking the Tropics meteorologist Amanda Holly standing by here with the latest that just came in on Hurricane Elsa.
Yeah, thanks, JB. You said it at the beginning. We've got a lot to get to in this episode of Tracking the Tropics. So let's throw up the rundown to kind of show you an idea of where we're going to be going with this episode. First, we're going to talk about what it's doing now, and then we're going to talk about what's steering Elsa and the strength factors that will potentially impact Elsa as it moves a little bit closer to the United States. So this is where we're looking at Elsa right now. This is a zoomed out map here. The United States, you can see it is just beginning to enter the Caribbean. It did strengthen into a hurricane early this morning. We actually got a special update from the National Hurricane Center before 8 a.m. And we got a couple of reports from those stations in Barbados and the Lesser Antilles, and the hurricane hunters were on their way. And we actually got some reports of hurricane strength winds. So, well, they upgraded it to a hurricane Category 1 hurricane with maximum sustained winds at 75 miles per hour. Well, within the past few hours, it actually has strengthened a little bit, which was not unexpected here. Maximum winds now at 85 miles per hour. It remains a Category 1 and it remains a racing system. It is still racing off to the west-northwest at 29 miles per hour. So you can see it's past the Lesser Antilles. It's still got a pretty good satellite presentation. So unfortunately, the mountains didn't really impact the system all that much. Pressure down to 991. Of course, just to give you a little bit of a history, if you weren't with us last season, the lower the pressure, usually the stronger the storm. So this is a look at water vapor. It was battling some dry air as well. It did a good job at defending itself from that. You can see it's basically dissipated all of that dry air and just kind of wiped it off, and it's holding its own as it makes its way through the Eastern Caribbean now. Again, it's moving very fast, so that's kind of one of the limiting factors in the strength over the next 24 hours. Can't rule out it may be strengthening a little bit here over the next 24 hours just because it is over some warmer waters. But I think that the National Hurricane Center's forecast track here through about Saturday evening is pretty good. They maintain that intensity of about 80-85 mile per hour sustained winds up until it starts to reach the Caribbean islands here. That would include the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and then on toward Cuba. All of those islands are very mountainous, and mountains usually weaken a system or at least prevent it from intensifying because the mountains, well, they extend really high into the atmosphere, and that prevents and disrupts the circulation of the storm. So that's what is going to help weaken it. So I've zoomed in here, and you can see by the time we get to Monday, Tuesday, and into Wednesday, those icons, the forecast, drop it back to a tropical storm status. That's one of the reasons. But the forecast cone still keeps Florida, basically the entire peninsula of Florida here in the cone on Monday, Tuesday, and into Wednesday. So this is something that we're going to continue to watch as we head through the weekend, but there still remains a lot of uncertainty with the exact track of this system. The GFS and some of the hurricane models agree that this is the path that it will take, but the European model still remains it taking it out to sea, out over the Bahamas, and then completely into the Atlantic and dissipates the whole thing. So we've still got a lot of uncertainty by the time we get to Monday, Tuesday, and into Wednesday. Hopefully the European will come into better agreement, but at this time, the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center has impacts beginning in Florida late Monday, Tuesday, and then exiting Florida on Wednesday. So that means as we head into the holiday weekend, if you're in Florida, you're going to want to check in and you're going to want to start thinking about what we need to do over the next couple of days to get you ready. I will say that, it is forecast to move over us as a tropical storm. So if that happens, it's certainly something that all of us can weather, but you still have to look at those preparations as we go through the next couple of days and what you're going to be doing. And if the cone stays where it's at now, I would suggest having all of your preparations come to a completion by early Monday morning. But that's the zoomed out cone here. Again, it's going to travel through the Caribbean, over the Caribbean islands, and then potentially toward the southeastern United States. But again, still a lot of uncertainty in this time frame right here. We could see some shifts, some big shifts over the next couple of days. So you want to check back in often for updates. This is why we could see big shifts. The forecast models, the spaghettis that everyone loves to look at, really good consensus up until about Sunday night. After that, watch what happens. They spread out like a windshield. So we've got some that take it into the Gulf of Mexico. We've got a couple that bring it out into the Atlantic, and the European line is not on this particular forecast model track here, the spaghetti models. That would show you most of them heading out into the Atlantic. So that means we've got a big spread. Models aren't exactly sure where it's going to go yet, and that leads to lower uncertainty in our forecast. But regardless, in the general direction, yeah, we could see potential impacts here in Florida by early next week. So let's talk about the steering currents just a little bit, and I do want to bring in Isaac here for this as well. We've got this big area of high pressure that helps steer tropical systems across the Atlantic, but we're also going to be seeing a weakness in this high pressure that could push it out to sea just a little bit more. And the timing of all of this, Isaac, is really going to help us determine where Elsa will end up going.
Yeah, Amanda, timing is always everything, because you mentioned that weakness could weaken the high pressure enough. And if it does fast enough, it's going to allow the system, especially if it's weaker, to move toward that weakness. And that's going to be better news for Florida. Worse news for the Bahamas. It's going to follow the European track. So the European probably is thinking that, hey, this high is going to weaken and turn north. But if that weakness doesn't really get to that high pressure system enough, that high, as your graphic shows, is going to hold. And you can see the point. It's just going to follow the weakness between the two and head straight to Florida. But again, the good news, bad news for Cuba is that they may absorb a lot of the energy and impact from this and weaken the system, but it is still something to watch for Floridians very closely.
Absolutely. And yeah, you mentioned Cuba there. Unfortunately, that looks like regardless if this takes a turn sooner or later, Cuba will be impacted. And because Cuba is a very mountainous island, it's going to squeeze some of that tropical moisture out of it. They usually see more tropical rains because of the mountains there, and that could lead to mudslides there in those mountainous islands. So if you have any family maybe there, I would maybe definitely make sure they're aware that this is headed their way, because even though it could be just a Category 1, maybe a tropical storm heading your way, doesn't mean we couldn't see a whole lot of rainfall coming out of the system as well. But again, this is what we're looking at. We're watching over the next couple of days. When does this area of high pressure start to back off? The earlier it backs off, the better for Florida. That means it's going to push out into the Atlantic, and Elsa will curve faster, moving over the Bahamas and out to sea. Best case scenario. But the GFS and the other hurricane-specific models continue to suggest this high pressure is going to remain a little bit stronger for a little bit longer, steering it a little bit closer to Florida. So we're all going to be watching when this weakness happens over the next couple of days. All right, we talked about the steering factors. Let's talk about the strength factors. Over the next couple of days, there's not a whole lot impeding it. That's why we're looking at the storm at least maintaining that strength of maybe 80, 85 mile per hour winds. But as we get into Sunday, that's when we're going to start to see that land interaction with the mountainous islands. Again, that's going to help to weaken it. We're also going to start to see some stronger upper level winds, which will hopefully help to kind of disrupt that circulation on Sunday and heading into Monday and Tuesday. And when we see this weakening right here over Sunday and over Cuba, it will hopefully lead to a weaker system as it makes its way a little bit closer to Florida. So we're going to continue to watch this particular factor as we head into the next couple of days as well. The steering and the strength, it's all very important. But as the storm, if the storm gets a little bit closer to Florida, we're certainly going to be using Max Defender 8 radar locally. We're going to be able to see this storm as it's approaching likely the Florida Keys and then into the Florida Bay there and into South Florida. We're going to be seeing this storm coming thanks to the powerful Max Defender 8 radar that we have in the Tampa Bay area. This is an S-band radar, and we can see through all of those thunderstorms. That's going to help to track this as it makes its way a little bit closer. All right, now we're going to turn it over to the meteorologist Q&A. Of course, JB mentioned this at the beginning. Use those hashtags, Hey Amanda, Hey Isaac, and Hey JB, and we're going to be able to answer your questions, hopefully to the best of our ability, over the next few minutes.
Meteorologist Amanda Holly, everybody, with the latest in front of Max Defender 8 and the latest on Elsa. She's coming to sit back down and join us here as far as the meteorologist Q&A. As Amanda mentioned, we're looking for those hashtags starting now. And let's get to this first one here from Nancy. Hashtag HeyJB. What are the chances Elsa will ride up the East Coast? Isaac, will bring you in here and talking about whether or not this could shift west towards you in Texas, or whether or not this could shift east up the East Coast of Florida. What do we say here for Nancy?
Nancy, thanks for your question. And I think the Gulf, for me in Texas, we're probably safe, but it's never too early to always watch it. But with your question, riding up the East Coast, as we mentioned, if that high pressure system weakens just a little bit faster, it's going to want to steer that system northward, maybe impacting parts of the southeast Florida coast, but then it's going to want to kind of just turn out to sea. So unless it re-strengthens, it's unlikely that would continue riding up the East Coast toward the Carolinas and the Virginias and even New England. So what could happen is if that high pressure system weakens, it will just sort of maybe brush the southeast Florida coast and then sort of want to move out to sea toward Bermuda, and also be weakening too because of the unfavorable wind shear. So that would be kind of the best case scenario for everybody, is that for the high pressure system to weaken, it turns north and then moves out to sea with minimal East Coast impacts.
A great question coming in here next, Isaac, and this is something that Amanda alluded to a little bit here as far as the different models that we have access to. And Betty, you're spot on with this question. Hashtag HeyJB, if the European model shows it's going out in the Atlantic, is that not the most accurate model? And the Euro has, just like we have super fans here on this program, the Euro has some super fans out there because it's has such a great track record over time. So what do you think here as far as Betty's question, Isaac?
That it's always good to never really truly discount the European model because of its excellent track record. But these other hurricane specific models have more physics and more calculations that are geared toward these types of setups. Remember, the European model is a sort of just synoptic big picture model, and we tend to look at smaller scale circulations with this hurricane. So sometimes they can create their own steering currents, and again, these hurricane specific models, some of these actually called for this amount of strengthening, and because of the faster movement that we were seeing and maybe a little bit of the wind shear, most of the experts, if you will, were kind of thinking, oh, maybe this won't quite get to hurricane strength because it's moving so fast and all these other factors. But some of these hurricane models actually nailed this strengthening very well. And so it's always, and Amanda's nodding there, always important to kind of look at the hurricane models too, but also keep a big picture and don't necessarily just discount the outlier, which is for now the European.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I was listening to Levi Cowens. He's the creator of Tropical Tidbits. He's got some great knowledge, as well as Dr. Philip Klotzbach. We talk about him quite often on the episodes as well. He was alluding to the fact that the GFS does a little bit better this time of year with systems that develop in this particular area. That's one of the reasons that maybe the National Hurricane Center is leading toward this track as well. But hopefully over the next 24 hours, maybe we'll get some better agreement amongst all the models, and we'll have a little bit more confidence.
We've got a lot of questions here coming in, folks. Again, JB Buno here with you in your hurricane headquarters. Meteorologists Amanda Holly and Isaac Williams there on the right side of your screen. Use any of the hashtags in the Facebook Live comment section here. Hashtag Hey Amanda, hashtag Hey Isaac, hashtag Hey JB, and we'll get to your comments here, or as many as we can here over the next 10 minutes as we're here live for you on Tracking the Tropics, tracking Hurricane Elsa. Let's get to one from WNCN's Facebook page. Chrissy Holland, hashtag Amanda, is it going to hit the Bahamas?
At this point, the official forecast doesn't call for that, but as we've been talking about, the uncertainty remaining very high as we get into Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. If we see a faster turn toward the north, the Bahamas would likely be impacted. And that is kind of what the European model is suggesting, although at that point, the European model, and I just looked at the newest run that came in, continues to still disrupt the system and basically just dissipates it altogether. So it would bring some tropical moisture over there, maybe some, slightly stronger winds, but at this point, it doesn't look like that is the more likely factor, just because all of the models have been, with the exception of the European, have been kind of pushing it a little bit farther to the west, which would lead to more of a Florida impact and not so much the Bahamas. Certainly not out of the question, but at this point, that is a little bit lower in the possibilities.
We'll bring up Isaac and Amanda for this next one from Jonathan Iber, hashtag AJB, hashtag Amanda, about when should we start taking this serious and start prepping. And I want to preface this question here, or this answer at least, by saying that there's still a lot of uncertainty here with these models, so it depends a lot, Isaac and Amanda, here on location.
Yeah, location and the timing of the system, the timing of the turn, of course. When we look at the official track, I think that South Florida would start to see those impacts early Monday morning. So that means any preparations would have to be completed by the time we get to Sunday, 4th of July. I know it's a holiday weekend. Nobody wants to think about the tropics on a holiday weekend here, but you can see as we get to Sunday, that's when the system, the center of the system, that's where the ends of those lines are. That means that those forecast models think that the center of the storm will be in that location. So if it's over Cuba at that point, we couldn't start to rule out the conditions deteriorating in, talk about the Florida Keys, in South Florida, in the Miami area. But then as we get into the late Monday, Tuesday timeframe, that's when the Tampa Bay area specifically could be looking at potential tropical impacts at that point. I'm not sure if that question was from WFLA's Facebook page or not, but we would likely start to see some of those impacts here in the Tampa Bay area late Monday, meaning your preparations should be coming to a completion by early Monday.
Got hopefully. Isaac back on the call here again. Apologies for the technical difficulties there, folks. Let's bring Isaac back in and ask him that same question. As far as preps, Isaac, what do you think?
When they should be coming to completion.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
Oh, sorry about that. Maybe we are muted on our end.
My apologies.
No, there we go. Try it again there, Isaac. We're talking about storm preps.
Storm preps and when they should be coming to completion, looking at the Florida Peninsula.
Yeah, well, so we've a month into hurricane season. It's always good to have that initial plan, right around June 1st to go ahead and start thinking about what you're doing. And as you mentioned, Amanda, Sunday night into Monday morning is when some of these impacts could start hitting South Florida if this current track holds. And I think it's just important. I know it's around a holiday weekend. It's very inconvenient. You may have family visiting, and should they leave early or should they not come at all? And a lot of questions. And, as you mentioned, this is not going to be at this point some sort of catastrophic situation for Florida. So I think all plans can be kind of continued through the weekend, but you may want to just be prepared to maybe, just be ready for some impacts Monday morning.
So one of the things I want to mention is specifically for the Tampa Bay area here, folks. You might see the tropical storm icon on there, maximum winds at 65 miles per hour. That is certainly something that we can weather. We've all dealt with some of that activity. I mean, some of the thunderstorms that we had in this past week probably contain some of those really strong winds, the heavy rain that we're likely going to be seeing with this tropical system as well. But the problem is we've seen a lot of rainfall in the month of June and our grounds are saturated. So that means it's not going to take a lot of wind to topple some trees because the grounds are saturated. We're going to be adding some more tropical rains on top of that. Again, that's all with the caveat if this forecast track holds. But, if we see a little bit of wind, it's not going to take much to topple some trees. That could lead to some power outages. And, depending on how long the power crews can get back out there and turn that power on, well, that's going to depend on, when they can do that. So that's why we want to say it might not be a terrible storm that we can't weather, but we still want to be prepared.
Got my eyes here on the Facebook Live comment section. A lot of great questions and comments to get to. Again, use a hashtag on your screen to ask a question. And we got this one that just came in from Michael Henderson, hashtag Hey Amanda. Any chance of this stalling like Hurricane Dorian did over the Bahamas in 2019. We've got some considerable movement here with this system, Amanda, but could it slow down or even stall, as Michael here is suggesting?
It's a great question, Michael, and yeah, we've dealt with that in the past, but that was sort of a different scenario. You can see the movement right now is at 29 miles per hour. That's thanks to the Bermuda high pressure that's in the middle of the Atlantic. It's steering that, it's on the southern edge of it, so it's steering it off to the west-northwest right now. The scenario that happened with Dorian, the steering currents basically collapsed and there was nothing pushing Dorian in any one which way. The difference with this is the Bermuda high is going to remain in place. It's just going to be the strength of that high depends on the turn. So no, I don't think we're going to see it stall. I do think that we will see a slowdown in the forward motion, but not nearly to the stationary point. I do think that we're going to continue to see this storm pretty much be maybe a 24, 36-hour event for those that are impacted.
Let's get to the next question here. I'm going to throw this one over to Isaac Williams. Tony Lee joining us, hashtag AJB. Is there a chance it can become stronger than a Category 1 hurricane?
I think that chance is there, and if it's going to happen, it's going to happen soon while it's still over the warmer waters and less sheared environment, because once it gets closer to Cuba and the mountainous islands of the Central Caribbean, that's off the table. And once it reemerges off the island of Cuba, there's not a lot of real estate there to allow it to any re-strengthening to happen. So yes, it could get up to a brief Category 2, but that I think would be kind of the ceiling. I was actually looking at the intensity models, and a couple of them do bring it up to Category 2 intensity, but for about 12 hours or less. And then it's back down to Cat 1 and tropical storm strength as it gets closer to Cuba and maybe the north side of Jamaica. So it's always possible. And, you know, we have seen such, I mean, even Elsa wasn't even forecast to become a hurricane yesterday. So with the hurricanes, I always adopt the ideology of expect the unexpected, but I think that's relatively unlikely at this point.
Yeah, Isaac echoing exactly what Amanda and I were talking about before this stream, that one category level cushion at times is to be considered as far as intensification forecasts and what we could see from a storm such as Elsa. Let's get to the next comment here from Deborah Brown, hashtag Hey Amanda. Any implications for travelers flying into or out of Orlando on Monday morning?
I don't think so. I think you should be fine by Monday morning. Just basically looking at the track here, you can see the time frame. 8 a.m. Monday, looks like the center will be somewhere near Cuba. That would mean we'd still be relatively fine here in the central Florida area. Now, South Florida would start to see impacts, but at that point, the Orlando area, Monday morning flight, shouldn't be any concerns. Anytime after that, that's when I would start to I don't know, look at your flight plans a little bit closer.
We have a great question. It's going to take me just a moment here to kind of load this up here. A question that just came in, and I want to get this one up here on screen because we talk about this a lot all the times. And, you know, this is one of the things that our commenters here talk about quite a bit in the comment section back and forth here on Tracking the Tropics when we're here live, everybody, you know, taking your questions over the course of a particular episode. And this one here from Diane, we're going to echo exactly what Diane is talking about here. Hashtag Hey Amanda, please inform people new to our state not to panic and hoard. And there, of course, we've got the quintessential comments that are coming in here about people, you know, panic buying toilet paper. And but let's remind folks that there's still a high degree of uncertainty on the back end of this track here, Amanda and Isaac. And also, yeah, we do have a lot of new people that have come into Florida over the last 6 months especially.
Yeah, lots of new folks in the state of Florida that may have never been impacted by a tropical system here. Listen, water for 3 days for each member of your family and your household. That would include your pets. That's a good basis. It's a good place to start. But again, this system is going to be on the weaker side, so that's good news. That would be worst case scenario. You should always just kind of have that on the just sitting in the corner of your house during the 6 months of hurricane season. Water's not going to go bad, so just if you don't get it right now, you should probably get it in the next couple days. Definitely don't hoard. Only take what you need. This is going to be something that, you know, we can absolutely handle. Like I said earlier, the showers and thunderstorms that we've had in the past several days, they were probably, you know, stronger than what we could potentially see with this. So something that we can handle for sure. Isaac, I know you guys deal with it when, you know, tropical systems come your way. Everyone rushes to the stores and buys a lot of stuff.
It does. And, you know, this would be different if this was expected to be, some huge hurricane, but this, not to take away from tropical storm, it can cause flooding and we have some wind problems. But as you mentioned, if you just have those essentials already in your house, or you can get them today or tomorrow, I think, all the Floridians will be, just fine. It's just unfortunate, I think, from a coverage perspective, because it's a holiday weekend and there's going to be, maybe not as much attention. You're going to be out at the beach, you're going to be out doing things with your family. But it is certainly something to keep an eye on. Don't let this be the last time that you check in on the forecast, because if 2020 taught us anything, if any hurricane season has taught us anything, these tracks can change. And, thankfully we're now where the storm can be close enough now where the hurricane hunters will be regularly flying in there. So we should be able to get some pretty good data to feed into these models and hopefully get us a better confidence forecast track and moving through the weekend.
Guys, meteorologist Amanda Holly has to step away for a 2:30 Eastern weather meeting that is really important here as far as coverage plans and what we are doing over the next several days to make sure that we're good to go here at WFLA and here on Tracking the Tropics to keep you, our viewers, of course, informed. So we'll let Amanda get going. We're going to stay here live with you for another 5 or so minutes here with Chief Meteorologist Isaac Williams here joining us from NBC 23 in South Florida. Isaac, what we're going to do is we're going to try to get some of the questions from some other sections of the country, people that are joining us from some other Facebook pages here across the southeastern United States. Let's get to this one here from Ashley Floyd from WKRG's Facebook page in Mobile, Alabama. Hashtag, hey, Isaac, what are the chances it makes it to Pensacola, Florida? Is there things keeping it away from our part of the Gulf? So a question here concerning the Florida Panhandle here, an area that we really haven't talked about here on this stream so far, Isaac.
Yeah, and thanks for your question. It looks like, obviously Tallahassee's in the cone here. Pensacola's close. We mentioned that little weakness in the Gulf of Mexico earlier that's going to act to kind of steer it or weaken that high pressure system over in the Atlantic. So I think the chance of any sort of major impact to Pensacola is pretty low at this point. But once it gets into the Gulf, even us, we always worry about higher surf. Even in Texas, I don't think we'll have to deal with that this time. But since it's closer to Florida, I could see where Pensacola could see a temporary increase in, some of the surf and the rip current risk up there. But any sort of major rain or wind impacts at this point would be very unlikely because of that weakness over the Gulf of Mexico that's going to want to steer it back to the right or to the northeast and away from the Alabama, Florida Gulf Coast for the most part.
How about this question that just came in from KDVR in Denver, that Facebook page, Jessica joining us, hashtag KJB, will rain increase in the Dallas area? Any Texas impacts whatsoever here with this system, Isaac?
No, this is not going to impact Texas at all. We're going to see our own increase in rain chance next week because of a different setup in the atmosphere, but not due to the tropics.
How about this one here? We're just covering the map here. Crystal Creations from WSAV's Facebook page, Savannah, Georgia, hashtag, hey, Amanda. What about Georgia, Isaac?
Georgia probably will be mostly okay. There could be a situation where parts of the Georgia coast see a little bit of rain and wind from this. If it tracks as we speak, you can see parts of the Georgia coast will be potentially impacted. But if it turns sooner, Georgia's not going to get impacted at all. But even still, once it gets to this point, you can see it's only a 45-mile-per-hour tropical storm. So it should be weakening as it moves across Florida and maybe impacting the Georgia coast. So, folks down towards Savannah, I was actually there about a month ago, gorgeous town. Just keep an eye on it, but this doesn't look to be like a major issue for Georgia.
How about from WNCN's Facebook page, Chris Morano joining us. Hey there, Chris. Hashtag, hey JB, hashtag, hey Amanda. Is there a chance the storm could stall after going through Cuba and re-strengthen? So we were talking a little bit earlier here, Isaac, about the interaction with land and the storm potentially being impacted by Cuba there, with Cuba being there, of course, to our south. What do we say here for that comment here from Chris?
Yeah, so Cuba will actually help it to slow down some, but it's not going to stall the system. I know it's moving very rapidly right now for a tropical system. Typically, they do not move this fast. But Cuba will act to slow it down just because of the friction of land interaction and the higher terrain. And as Amanda mentioned earlier, the high pressure system's still going to be there in the Atlantic. It's just going to maybe be a little bit weaker in spots, but the steering currents are still going to be there. And I think that's the most important thing, because somebody asked about Dorian last year or a couple of years ago. And this is not going to be like that. The steering currents there just collapse and just basically dissipated. But we're going to continue to have enough of a steering current here to keep this thing moving. But Cuba will act to slow it down just a bit, but it's not expected to re-strengthen once it gets past Cuba because of those land interactions and disrupting the system just a bit.
We got some other regions here. Again, this is a last call. You see there at the bottom of your screen, the last call for any questions or comments for Chief Meteorologist Isaac Williams joining us from NBC 23 in South Florida. We only got another 90 or so seconds here as far as the Q&A portion of Tracking the Tropics. So let's get to Adriana here. Hashtag Hey Isaac, does it look like Louisiana will be affected? And every time here, Isaac, that we talk about the state of Louisiana, we think back to the 2020 hurricane season, where we were just a year ago here when we talk about all the storms that battered southern Louisiana, coastal Louisiana here especially. So folks in Louisiana always asking about particular storms and whether or not they're going to impact that area of the country.
Yeah, and Adriana, I get it. Storm anxiety is real, and it's a real thing. And as you can see on the track here, I think there's almost no chance that Louisiana gets impacted by this. You know, I say almost no chance because in weather, very little things are 100% certain, but you can just see all of our spaghetti models. There's really only that one outlier that brings it, out into the Gulf. But as I mentioned earlier, I think that weakness and that persistent weakness in the Gulf of Mexico, when I say weakness, it's basically just a weakness in the upper air flow, but it's going to be just enough to kind of prevent it from steering farther into the Gulf. And this should be, there's that weakness right there. It's going to continue to stay there. That's not going anywhere. That's good news for Louisiana and Texas, just bad news for Florida, Cuba, and the Bahamas, and that is going to help steer it northward. But for your question, Adriana, in Louisiana, I think you're okay.
All right. And just like that here, everybody, for all the folks in the Facebook Live comment section that missed meteorologist Amanda Holly, yeah, she's back because she just loves being here with us on Tracking the Tropics and answering questions. And she's right on time to answer this one here from Mindy. Hashtag HJB, what can the Florida Keys expect? Amanda and I love the Florida Keys, as many of you do here in the Facebook Live comment section. A lot of questions here about the Keys, Amanda.
Yeah, I think the Keys, again, as I've been saying for basically the entire state of Florida, this isn't something that you can't weather. As it moves closer to the Florida Keys, I would expect a tropical storm, maybe very low chance of a low-end Category 1 storm coming in. And that's because it's going to move right over Cuba before it makes its way toward the Florida Keys on the current forecast track thinking. That's good news because, again, the islands are very mountainous, and that will help to weaken the storm there. But as for impacts in the Florida Keys, you're going to expect the tropical rains. And because you guys are all just vulnerable islands down there, beautiful, but vulnerable, storm surge definitely not out of the question. It's hard to say exactly what kind of storm surge we'd be looking at, what kind of heights. We'll have to determine that as we get a little bit closer because, of course, that depends on the tides as well. But, can't rule out a few isolated water spouts moving on shore into some of those islands. So you'll have to watch for that. And the winds, obviously the winds with a tropical system are going to be a key factor. Again, this isn't going to be a major system moving through like we had a few years ago. Certainly something we can weather, but all of those kind of weaker end tropical impacts, I would expect.
And we're going to take this one here from Leanne and hashtag HJB. Due to fly out of Miami on Monday evening, thoughts on aircraft still flying over that time? I think this is going to be the last question we're going to be taking here, everybody, on this edition of Tracking the Tropics. We got to get going here. We got a lot of work ahead of us in the days and hours ahead, but let's talk about Miami for a second. Miami, of course, dealing with the condominium collapse there in Surfside there in South Florida. The last thing that they want is a hurricane or what would be a tropical storm Elsa at the time, based on the current models, impacting them there. They have so much work to do. What do we say regarding South Florida? Isaac, we'll start with you.
Yeah, very tough scene there, and our thoughts and prayers are with those affected by the collapse. But in terms of air travel, as Amanda mentioned, South Florida will be dealing with potential disruptions as early as Monday afternoon or Monday evening, and Miami would be included in that. But, it should be in a weakening phase. It's tough to tell how much quote unquote damage the storm will be or how much damage Cuba will do to the storm in terms of weakening it. But it just depends. If there's still kind of a solid wall of rain and wind accompanying the storm as it moves past there, I could see, a lot of cancellations or delays for Miami at that point. But if it's broken more apart and there's only more like spiral bands that aren't just, one mass of rain and wind, you may get some spotty cancellations and delays, but it wouldn't be a travel nightmare, I don't think, Amanda.
Yeah, I think that, if the storm is disrupted by Cuba enough, we'll get some breaks in those rain bands and flights will be able to get off the ground. Unfortunately, I'm not a meteorologist for any of the airline companies, and I don't know their exact criteria for when they start to cancel those flights and when they really start to, delay them and then, try and cancel them. So that is something that you really have to keep an eye on. I do think that if your flight is Monday evening in Miami, you will need to check back in more often for those updates. Check with your flights, your flight carrier, and check back in often with the exact track of the storm to see if, maybe this thing shifts completely east and we won't be talking about any impacts and your flight would be fine. But certainly that is, if you've got a flight out of South Florida in the next, on Monday, I would check in with them.
A lot of flights questions, and we have a lot more coverage coming your way, everybody, on Tracking the Tropics. So as this system gets a little bit closer to the Gulf, we're going to continue to monitor, of course, all these developments, and we're going to be here live with you for additional episodes as needed here, especially when we get into early next week. You see there the latest track here from the National Hurricane Center, and especially beginning Monday morning, we're really going to be keeping a very, very close, we're already keeping a close eye on it, but we're going to be really hyper-focused on tracking Hurricane Elsa beginning on Monday morning. So our Tracking the Tropics team, of course, on standby, ready to go live at a moment's notice to keep you informed here on what we're expecting as far as this system heading a little bit closer to the United States. Really want to thank Isaac Williams for joining us here, everybody, from KVEO NBC 23 in South Texas. Hey, really hot there in South Texas, right, Isaac?
Yeah, I was telling JB it's 103 for our heat index today, so pretty brutal.
You could use some rain there.
Yeah,
we could.
103 degrees in South Texas, folks. Again, we're going to continue to bring in meteorologists from across the United States here to get their expertise and their experience as far as tracking storms here on Tracking the Tropics. Our regular episodes, Wednesdays, 2 o'clock Eastern and 1 o'clock Central, or as storms like Elsa pop up here, we're live on apps, social media platforms, and websites across the United States. And, of course, our Tracking the Tropics team here at WFLA in Tampa, Florida. Big thanks to Isaac Williams, Amanda Holly. I'm JB Buno. We'll see you for the next edition as we continue to monitor Hurricane Elsa here on Tracking the Tropics.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.